Ah yes, time to upload my new video. I've yet to crack 100 views on regular videos, but I've had some reasonable traffic lately from the shorts that I've made. Maybe I can aim for 200 views, and then I'll... So that happened. Hello there, my name is Mr. Wizardly. I've already done a video talking about the top 6 problems with Matt Mercer's Bloodhunter. You can check that out if you haven't seen it yet. It isn't required viewing, but you'll probably get a good idea of where I'm coming from when it comes to my major design goals if you've watched that one. So now that I've played the devil and remorselessly torn the Bloodhunter class to shreds with total pwnage, it's time to be the angel instead. To heal and forgive this sick and sinful homebrew class, and show you how I went about fixing its problems in my own games. Behold, a full Bloodhunter class rework, which is available for free right now down in the description box below. Clickety 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 click. Download the free PDF right now.
Hey, Mr. Wizardly, maybe this video will be less popular because it doesn't involve you being mean to someone who is successful and famous on the internet.
Crushing existential despair is starting to set in.
But let's have some faith in humanity, shall we?
You know what, angel on my shoulder? You're right. I shall transcend these mortal shortcomings and doubts, and press on with the video as planned. So for this one, I'll be talking about what I've done to the main core class features of the Bloodhunter, and in subsequent videos I'll be talking about the changes I made to each of the subclasses, and my rationale for doing so. I don't think I'll go over all of the new blood curses, I don't think that's necessary. You can look them over in your own time, but there are about 20 new ones, and I rebalanced a number of the existing ones, so hopefully there are plenty for you to choose from, and if you don't like what else I've done to the class, at the very least you can steal that from me. Oh, and one last thing I'd like to say is that if Mr. Mercer wishes to steal any of this for future updates to his own rules for the class, he is more than welcome to, as this is fundamentally his baby after all. I wouldn't say no to a shout out maybe if he thinks what I have done is cool, but I want to make it clear that he is the giant whose shoulders I am standing upon when I deliver this version of the class to you, so the lion's share of the credit still belongs squarely with him, okay? So, with that out of the way, let's go! Wizarding Workshop Deep Dive. First up, I have not changed the hit points or hit dice of the Bloodhunter. The reason why I'm telling you about something that I haven't changed is because it is actually one of the more commonly recommended fixes for the class, and on the face of it, it doesn't seem like a bad idea. You want to be able to spend hit points to use your features without feeling like, in doing so, you're making yourself super squish. This line of logic sounds appealing, and it comes from a good place, but I would argue that you're looking at the problem in the wrong way. You've put the cart before the horse, as it were. In fact, I would say that giving Bloodhunters more hit points is a very boring way of trying to make the class stronger. Hear me out. One of the core pillars of the class, as I see it, is the idea that you can spend hit points to use or amplify an effect. Therefore, the goal of your Blood Maledict, for example, should be to give you 3 choices. To spend the resource to get the basic effect, to spend the resource and lose some hit points to get the amplified effect, or to not use the resource and save it until a time when it will be more effective. I don't want to turn this into a binary decision where you either use the amplified effect or save it. I want all 3 to be simultaneously viable because that's interesting. And I think that the reason why people feel like the basic effect isn't viable is because they get so few uses out of their Blood Maledict as it is. And so they feel like they have to wring as much value out of the feature as physically possible. They don't want to feel like they wasted it. That is wholly understandable. But I think that they would be a lot less anxious about it if they could simply use the feature more frequently. Then they'll feel like, well, on the one hand, I've got plenty of Blood Maledicts that I can use, but I also don't have a lot of hit points that I feel that I can spare at the moment, so I don't want to amplify all of them. If I hold off until I get more hit points, maybe my Blood Maledicts won't be used at all, and they'll just go to waste. So I'll throw a couple of non-amplified ones into the mix as well, to make sure that I'm making efficient use of my resources while also conserving my number of hit points. So as you can see, by adding more blood maledicts for you to play around with, that still makes the class more powerful, but unlike with adding hit points, it does so by giving you more active choices and more resource management, rather than removing choices and removing the elements of resource management that made it interesting to begin with. I hope that explains it. By the way, if you've got any questions about this or any other point that I make in the video for that matter, you can ask me in the comments section down below, and hopefully myself or someone else will be able to clarify it for you. So to quickly go through the other more basic changes that I made before getting onto the full class features, I gave them Intimidation as a class skill. It might not always be very useful, as you might consider dumping your Charisma stat, but you're enough of an edgelord character that I think that you should at least have it as an option. And as for the equipment, first, no starting with studded leather. We're going to treat this like a normal class. So you have 3 choices. You can choose to wear leather armor, which is only really worth it if you have 20 dexterity, and otherwise you choose a chain shirt if you want to be stealthy, or scale armor if you don't want to be stealthy but want slightly more protection instead. Either way, you're going to ideally want at least a 14 in your dex to be optimal, and to get the most out of your protection, if you can manage it. Although this will vary depending upon what stats you have and what you want to prioritize. Second, you now get to choose between 2 martial weapons or 1 martial weapon and a shield. Rapier and shield is a popular combo, but you could also choose a couple of different 2-handed weapons or a pair of short swords if you plan on dual wielding, whatever takes your fancy. And a book of curses? What is this? You're gonna find out. Just you wait. Anyway, Hunter's Bane. This is very similar to the original, now with added grim psychometry to make it slightly more useful. However, instead of giving you advantage, it lets you roll your Hemocraft die and add it to the total, which is mathematically slightly worse at lower levels, but it scales to be much better after that point. And it allows other people to help you on the ability check without you feeling sad that, aw, there's no point in them helping because advantage doesn't stack. I have also expanded the creature types it works with to include Celestial. Why did I do this? Digression incoming.
Oh no, this loser Mr. Wizardly, he's about to go off on one. Quick audience, B-Team Devil, skip to the timestamp ahead. It's the only way to not get completely bored out of your mind.
Wait, don't skip. B-Team Angel instead. If you listen to it, you will find that it's a beautiful, philosophical, and insightful digression that speaks to underlying themes surrounding different creature types. You don't want to miss it.
Boring. I'm hitting the button. You should too. Do it. Do it!
No! Well, the primary purpose of creature types is to show the different nature of different creatures. Well, duh. But there are some that fall into similar roles. For instance, you can group certain creature types into either mortal creatures or extraplanar beings. However, you can also get more specific than that. Of the extraplanar creatures, you have aberrations, which are basically weird alien Cthulhu monsters that come from a place beyond the mortal world, perhaps the astral plane, the far realm, or outer space. You have elementals, which are basically the living essence of material things, the building blocks of the material universe. And then you have what I would call the spirits, which sort of occupy a space which is based more in religious and occult lore and superstitions. They have a place in the human psyche and speak to the soul. They aren't material in the same way that a blob of water or an alien or a bush that can talk is. They are transcendent beings that speak directly to human nature and human experiences. They embody our virtues, our wickedness, our fears and desires, our moral questioning, and our wonder at the world around us. Celestials are good spirits from the heavenly realms that embody virtue. Fiends are evil spirits from the evil realms that embody sin. Fae are capricious magical nature spirits that embody the fickleness of life and the dangers and wonders of nature, which often go hand in hand. And undead are the lingering remains of people who have in some way been able to cheat death and persist beyond what is natural for them, whether through monstrous misfortune or intentional design. They represent man's fearful rejection of his own mortality and the extreme lengths which some people are willing to go to in order to continue their existence, or who are trapped in a state of perpetual, horrifying torment. I ain't getting into the whole debate about whether all undead are inherently evil or whatever, we'd be here all day, but at the very least, I would describe them as things that should have ended a long time ago, but that either jealously cling to the world or remain trapped and unable to leave it against their will. which evokes the idea of something stale, stagnant, malingering, decaying, something not fresh, not vital, not clean, something less than fully human. You can hopefully see how there are a lot of what I would call human things, human feelings and questions about existence and spirituality and morality and the nature of the universe from a human perspective. Matt was tapping into this idea, but he left Celestials off the list because he figured that Blood Hunters were people who sacrificed their own humanity to better fight evil. And well, Celestials aren't evil. Only Celestials can be evil. Matt himself has run multiple corrupted and evil Celestials that have gone rogue in his time as a dungeon master at the Critical Role game table. So anyway, I think that those 4 creature types are like peas in a pod for the purposes of a Witch Hunter style class, which is why I also grouped them together for the purposes of Hunter training in my rework of the Ranger class, which is basically just a more functional version of the old favourite enemy class feature. The Ranger Reborn, which I refer to as the Hunter, quick plug, is available now to my supporters on Patreon and Subscribestar at Wizard's Apprentice tier and above. Thank you to Son of Revan and John. So you can go check that out as well if you're interested.
Glad I skipped over that soppy, sentimental garbage. Devil Gang is now back in the house, baby. Devil Gang, Devil Gang.
Angel Gang pities you. We were having a good time.
That was wholly unnecessary.
One last important thing that I've changed about Hunter's Bane is getting rid of the choose your intelligence or wisdom modifier as your Hemocraft modifier rule. I did this for both balancing and flavor purposes. Wisdom is just flat out a better stat than intelligence. It includes some of the most powerful skills in the game like perception and insight, and it is also used as one of the most important saving throws. However, wisdom also goes against all of the Blood Hunter's flavor, which talks about delving into forbidden arcane research and using your occult knowledge to better hunt down and destroy the enemies of humanity. The whole class comes across as very intellectual and educated and calculated rather than instinctual. I also think that it's interesting to give Blood Hunters a weakness to wisdom saves unless you make certain trade-offs to try and shore that up, as it will lead to more variety in the kinds of builds that people will make. You have 6 ability scores and you will likely only be able to prioritize 3 or 4 of them to any kind of reasonable standard. It could also be that they are potentially more susceptible to corruption, given how they are delving into dark places and trying to fight fire with fire. Who is to say that they shouldn't occasionally fall prey to magical manipulation or temptation if they haven't taken sufficient steps to guard themselves against it? Oh, we're finally here. We're on to the big one, as they say. The main event, the big change. Ta-da!
Mr. Wizardly, why have you made Blood Hunters into wizards?
Because it's in my name, darling. Actually, it's because it's cool. And in keeping with the Blood Hunter's arcane flavoring, you get a book of curses with 6 blood curses of your choice in it at first level, and you can add a blood curse to the book for free each time you level up. When you finish a long rest, you get to prepare a number of blood curses equal to half your Blood Hunter level plus your intelligence modifier, which are chosen out of the ones in your book. At level 1, this just means a number equal to your intelligence modifier. At level 2, it means your intelligence modifier plus 1, etc. Here's a handy chart. And what's more is that you can discover more blood curses while out adventuring. Maybe the evil necromancer has a few stuffed away in the books of his library. Maybe there is one that is inscribed onto the great stone door of an evil temple. Maybe there's a sword with a blood curse inscribed onto the blade. Go nuts, because just like with wizards, the DM can make this kind of hands-on arcane archaeological research really fun. You do also have to look after your book, of course, but they're relatively cheap to copy, and if you're a member of a knightly order, maybe they'll be able to help you out if you somehow lose yours in an accident somewhere. So you have more flexibility of options without being too overwhelmed. You're incentivized to roleplay this intrepid researcher character. So what's left? Well, as I hinted, I've increased the number of blood curses that you have to play with at earlier levels. Now, you still only get 1 per short rest at first and second level, because we don't want a martial character that is overshadowing the full casters. Bearing in mind that wizards get to cast 2 spells per day at first level and 3 spells per day at second level, and your blood curses are action economy efficient because they're either a bonus action or a reaction, so you get to do your martial thing while also using a blood curse at the same time. But do not fear, young one, because there is another way, besides a short rest, to regain a use of your Blood Maledict. At all levels, you regain a use of it when you reduce another creature with blood in it to 0 hit points. So let's say that at level 1, you're Mr. Blood Hunter, out there hunting yo blood, you cast your blood curse. Oh no, I've got no more blood curses. Kill a guy. Yay! Now I can cast another blood curse. This simple little minigame will also make you quite kill hungry, which will add to the other characters in your party thinking that you're just a little bit weird, and maybe slightly uncomfortable about your, evil forbidden magic. Everyone gets their second Blood Maledict use at level 3, plus another Blood Maledict at level 6, level 11, and level 16. The upper end is roughly the same, but the lower end has had its quality of life improved dramatically. By level 7, each subclass also gets a unique and special way of using their Blood Maledict, on top of all the blood curses that they already know. So you should have plenty of options for things that you can do. I think that the small number that you get per short rest, plus further drip feeding from kills, is better than giving you a large amount all in one go. Having playtested Blood Maledict as being usable X times per long rest, I find that it works perfectly fine at lower levels, but at higher levels it starts to become rather unwieldy and the wheels start to fall off, because it tends to encourage characters to go Nova, as it were, rather than ration the Blood Maledicts as I had originally envisaged. As remember, you can use up to 2 blood curses per round, one using your bonus action, the other using your reaction. Oh, I should also probably mention another noticeable change. Firstly, when you amplify your blood curse or activate your Crimson Rite, rather than dealing yourself necrotic damage that can't be prevented, which is weird, I just made it so that you straight up lose hit points. And secondly, and more meaningfully, I've also removed random chance from the amount of hit points that you lose. There are far too many variables to keep track of in the game as it is, so losing a consistent amount of hit points, rather than a random amount that is based on the roll of the dice, provides you with a fighting chance to actually try and weigh up the risk of, is this worth it? I would rather have this stability than have to pray to the RNG gods not to screw me over this time. The number of hit points you lose is equal to your proficiency bonus. This scales to be a relevant amount of damage at all levels, as blood curses don't really increase all that much in terms of their power level, but your total number of hit points definitely do increase. Let's say that you want to multi-class into Blood Hunter at the higher levels for some reason. Why should you get the same effect for fewer hit points lost than the pure Blood Hunter, who is the exact same level as you? I think that the part that makes the feature interesting is the fact that the number of hit points you potentially lose are a noticeable cost that you have to pay, and it needs to feel like a noticeable cost. Losing 2 hit points at level 18 isn't that noticeable, but 6 hit points might just sting a little bit. So that just about covers the class features that you get at first level. At this point, some of you might be saying, "Whoa, Mr. Wizardly, this train we're on, it's totally out of control. It's gonna flip right off the rails. These buffs are cuckoo, crazy, bananas, completely nuts. There's no way that this class isn't overpowered right now. Hit it with the Nerf bat, quick. I don't want this broken, bonkers, poo-poo pants homebrew at my game table." To which I would gladly respond by offering you some perspective, by comparing the Blood Hunter to the default player's handbook fighter. Ah, good old fighty McFightface, vanilla chud, the gold standard of the martial classes. If we spend a moment examining the fighter's first level kit, they get Second Wind, which is strictly better than Matt's original Blood Maledict feature. It has the same cooldown, you can only use it once per short rest, but its effect is significantly stronger than any single blood curse is, even if you take into account amplification. And then you have a fighting style, a constant, always-on buff to your character's combat ability. And what do Blood Hunters get in place of a fighting style? Hunter's Bane, which is basically just a neat little ribbon ability. A ribbon ability, for those of you who don't know, is something that is a niche, small-scale effect that is flavorful and sometimes useful, but doesn't have a huge impact on the way that you play your class most of the time. Ah, but blood hunters know one more skill than fighters do. But fighters have heavy armor proficiency. That was the trade-off that was made. One skill proficiency for one armor proficiency. Now, as much as I've buffed the blood hunter, you can clearly see that in terms of raw power, even after my buffs, the fighter still has a slight edge. I would hazard a guess that you would probably need to use your blood maledict 3 times in a fight, just to draw even in terms of impact. In short, my blood hunter is much more flexible than the original, plays into the flavor of the class, offers more role-playing opportunities, and is much closer in power level to the default classes in the player's handbook, other than default ranger, because default ranger is bad. Put it in the bin. Use literally anything else, preferably my version of the ranger. Available to Wizards Apprentice tier supporters on Patreon and Subscribestar now. So what's cooking at level 2? You finally unlock your own fighting style? I've included some rebalanced fighting styles for some of the weaker options to make them more appealing, and you also get your Crimson Rite feature with the updated hit point loss changes that I mentioned earlier. You know how I complained in my previous video about the lack of choices? Well, now you learn 2 Crimson Rites right out of the gate. Fire and Cold. Only now, each of them has unique secondary effects. When you use fire, your weapon sheds dim light out to a range of 20 feet, and you ignite a flammable object that isn't being worn or carried that takes fire damage from the Rite. Meanwhile, when you use cold, each creature that takes damage from the Rite has their speed reduced by 10 feet, although this effect doesn't stack on the same target. Both are situationally useful, and you aren't locked into one particular choice. Now, to address the elephant in the room, where has Lightning gone? Well, there are multiple reasons for this. Firstly, Lightning is the odd one out, both thematically and mechanically. Temperature control is thematic. You can see how hot and cold go together. Lightning doesn't fit into that theme. It's just slightly off to the side somewhere. Meanwhile, mechanically, cold and fire have a decent amount of overlap, and have a similar number of creatures that are resistant and immune to these damage types. Even though fire damage by itself ultimately beats out cold in terms of being slightly more useful, the secondary effects help to balance that out. However, fewer creatures are resistant or immune to lightning than the other two, and those creatures that are resistant to it don't have nearly as much overlap with fire and cold. And I figured, well, you're only going to have 2 options to choose from anyway, so might as well just lock them in. It's also worth mentioning that sometimes limiting your options ironically makes your choice more interesting and meaningful, as it starts being more about you comparing 2 imperfect tools and considering their pros and cons, rather than simply choosing the one correct answer. I've also technically given you a stash of secret Crimson Rites towards the back of my PDF that your Bloodhunter player might be able to discover if you drop it in as a special reward, but they don't come in as default options. And one final note on Crimson Rite, I limited its duration to 1 hour rather than until your next short or long rest. I like that mechanic's wording for the mutant's drugs, but nothing else in the game really functions this way mechanically, and given how much I've buffed the class at early levels, making it so that you don't use your Crimson Rite frivolously is just a small nerf to help bring it mechanically in line with the other classes. At 3rd level, you get to choose your Bloodhunter order like before, but as I said earlier, I will be covering each subclass in a separate video, otherwise this would go on and on forever, so subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when those come out. I'll skip over ability score improvements and extra attack as there's nothing to see there, and move on to Brand of Castigation. The only real change here is that instead of dealing psychic damage, when you sear the brand into the target using your Crimson Rite, the brand deals the same damage type as the Crimson Rite you used to make the brand. This change basically rewards you for which Crimson Rite you used. I think it's quite thematic, even if it is technically a slight nerf until the higher levels. At 9th level, you get Secrets of the Ancients. This ribbon ability replaces the old, more vaguely defined ribbon ability of Grim Psychometry. I got the vibe that Matt was going for with this one, but it seemed a little bit weird and highly dependent on DM interpretation, so I don't think it works as well. As I already mentioned, I took the mechanical part of it and incorporated it into Hunter's Bane to buff that slightly. But the vision part I ditched because it is a non-mechanic. It's entirely narrative fluff, and the DM can already choose to ignore it. But by writing it down explicitly as a possibility in the mechanic, you are pushing the DM to make more work for themselves under the threat of the player feeling hard done by if they never get any visions when they use the ability. It's what Jeremy Crawford would call a Mother May I mechanic. A player's class features should be clear and give the player agency, not be woolly and vague and subject to DM fiat. It's also worth noting that the DM already has the ability to give arbitrary visions to anyone at any time for any reason, including using class flavor to justify it, and I actually encourage DMs to do so when they feel up to it, because when used correctly and sparingly, you can give the players some cool narrative insights that they couldn't get any other way, but players shouldn't feel entitled to getting them, certainly not through their class features directly. Secrets of the Ancients does something similar to this visions malarkey, but it is a much more clearly defined mechanic. Few wizards seem to even notice that the spell Contact Other Plane exists. It's buried under so many other good options, so this will be your thing most of the time. And like the wizard, you're also proficient in intelligence saves, so there's a good chance that your brain won't be melted when you use it. Pro tip, save this ritual until the end of an adventuring day, otherwise you might just get screwed if you don't have a greater restoration spell on tap. Just make sure to play up the creepy and spooky factor as the DM when your player uses that ritual, because blood hunters are tethered to the darkness, baby. Send their mind to the dark dimension, to the Shadowfell, to a floating astral prison, to the 9 hells, to some lair of evil. Make it feel dangerous and forbidding. Have them talk to shadow monsters, fiends, the souls of long-dead evil wizards. You could even have them talk to their otherworldly patron or one of their patron's agents if they're a profane soul, and if they happen to fail their saving throw and their brain turns to mush, describe like a horror scene what terrible psychic attack befalls them. You meet with the fiend, but it turns out that he isn't in the mood to talk, so he cuts off your astral body's head and impales it on a nearby pike that decorates his lair. But unlike with a physical body, you still maintain consciousness the whole time, and so you scream and scream and scream until your connection finally fades, and you return in a near catatonic state back to your trembling body, utterly traumatized, unable to even form coherent sentences. But don't worry, you'll be fine. You'll recover. Suck it up, edgelord. You asked for this by playing this class. Dark Augmentation is the same as it was before. It is as strong as ever. Buffing 2 primary saving throws that most of the time you'll already be somewhat decent with, as well as the most common secondary saving throw? Count me in. Brand of Tethering has been changed. It no longer prevents the target from using the dash action because there are plenty of blood curses out there that allow you to limit another creature's movement, so go use them instead. In addition, now when a creature makes a saving throw to try and teleport or escape its current plane of existence, it takes damage associated with your brand rather than psychic damage, and it is equal to 4 rolls of your Hemocraft die rather than 4d6, so this means that it scales a lot better overall. At 14th level, you get access to the improved Crimson Rite feature. You get a unique and special Crimson Rite from your subclass, which replaces the Esoteric Rite that you used to choose in Matt's version at this level. This is a better damage type that significantly fewer creatures are resistant or immune to, with its own secondary effects. However, unlike before, it doesn't make your fire and cold rites obsolete, because in addition to the different secondary effects, as part of the improved Crimson Rite feature, you also gain resistance to the damage types of your active Crimson Rites. This creates a web of pros and cons depending upon which Crimson Rite you use, meaning that situationally each is a valid choice, a side grade from the others rather than a straight upgrade. Even though the new damage type is better for bypassing resistances, it is normally less useful at resisting damage because rarer damage types don't tend to come up as frequently. Fire and cold damage come up all the time, so they are more likely to give you a useful resistance. But on the flip side, more creatures are resistant and immune to them. This is also a subtle buff to dual-wielding characters who are more flexible about which rites they can use, as they can have up to 2 of them active at a time, and there will be times when having resistance to a damage type is better than having a shield out. What happened to the Hardened Soul ability? Well, the short answer is it was feature bloat. I already had improved Crimson Rite at this level, which is complex enough as it is, without adding yet another feature to keep track of on top of it. It simply isn't necessary. Besides, as I stated earlier in this video, I think that it's neat that Bloodhunter has a potential weakness in wisdom saving throws unless you actively choose to shore it up. Also, this feature had overlap with Blood Curse of the Exorcist, the Ghost Light's Brand of Cleansing feature, and the Mutant's Grim and Temerity catalysts, so I think it's fine to remove it. You still have options if you want to go that route, only now it's more of an active choice that costs a resource rather than a dull, always-on effect. Now we go on to cover the spooky mystery of the missing 17th level class feature from Matt's Bloodhunter. I hadn't actually noticed this at the time when I made my top 6 Bloodhunter fails video, and who can blame me, because most people won't even get to this level in adventuring, and that is probably why it has gone underneath the radar. Matt has unfortunately done a goof, as the kids say. It happens to the best of us when editing a class. You accidentally leave something in that shouldn't be there, or leave something out. In fact, I'll own up to it and I'll admit that I did something very similar several times over the course of my initial drafts of the PDF of my new Bloodhunter, which I have since corrected. Thank you to YouTube handle Grinning Grey Forge for spotting one of those oopsies. So, we're given contradictory information in Matt's current version of the class. I'm assuming that the main table here is correct for how many Blood Maledict uses you get, and that the text of the class feature, which says that you get a 4th Blood Maledict use at 17th level, is wrong. However, that is just my best guess, because they totally contradict each other. Technically, either one could be correct. The unfortunate thing is that if I'm right, and the main table that has the number of blood curses on is correct, then there actually isn't a Blood Hunter feature at 17th level at all. Nothing. Nada. Zilch. Whoops. You don't have to worry about that in my version, because I've added Rite Revival as a base class feature. What is this? It was originally the capstone of the Ghost Slayer subclass, but I gave them a different one because this feels like all Blood Hunters should be able to use it. When you would be reduced to 0 hit points and not killed outright, you can extinguish a Rite to drop to 1 hit point instead. Really neat, really thematic, and helps the Blood Hunter with their durability issues. And lastly, Sanguine Mastery at level 20 is the same. No changes, nothing. And so, with that, we're done with the changes to the main class. I would like to remind you to grab yourself a copy of the PDF down below, and to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when each of the individual subclass videos comes out, which will be much shorter and therefore much faster and easier to make than this whopper was. My paid supporters tend to receive exclusive subclasses. The next exclusive subclass that I will be making will be for Bloodhunter, which will conceptually be a heavily armored melee Bloodhunter with an undead companion. The Order of the Death Knight. It's a totally original concept, do not steal. I don't know what you're talking about when you say that you've seen it somewhere before. You're probably lying or mistaken or something. I totally came up with it all by myself. And again, thank you to my paid supporters, Son of Revan and John. I intend to work hard to give you and other future paid supporters more value soon, TM, in the form of some high quality premium homebrew. Death Knight, woo! And looking to the future, in my next big project, which is actually mostly done, I will be working on giving you all a free rework of the Warlock class. Another favourite of mine that has been done dirty in 5th edition, and is desperately in need of some similar quality of life improvements to the Bloodhunter. So that's all from me for now. This is Mr. Wizardly, signing off. I will be working on giving you a free rework